Without any further ado, I would like to invite our next speaker, Mr. John Turner, the CEO of XBRL International. And John is a good friend for a number of years, and so I've asked him to do a little bit more challenging thing, to set his mind adrift and think about how things will look like in 10, 20 years from now. He's got quite a nice experience to do that. He's coming from back in time from the Australian Prudential Regulatory Authority, where he worked as a data expert, and now is the CEO of one of the larger standardization bodies across the world. So I hope we'll be able to see some of these future insights from John. John, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Michal, and good afternoon, everybody. It's very nice to be here. I'm sorry that I'm not going to be here for very long today, because I think that the idea behind the TODI effort and the workshop approach and the future focus is excellent. I'm also sorry that you're not really going to be hearing from me today. This is a polite health warning. You should take something from the next few minutes or not. It's really up to you. Because we've had Michal asked me to do this talk, and he said, look, think about 10 years out, 20 years out. Let's try and think a long way out. And I was trying to work out what to do there. But then, fortunately, there was this sort of really amazing combination of situations. But I don't know whether, well, you don't know about this, but it turns out that in 2025, there was an extraordinary astronomical event. Just 7.5 light years away, there's a black hole that is going to, it's really quite confusing, turn up. And that black hole has sort of created a weird mirror. And it's meant that instead of information going forward in time, it can come backwards in time. So today we've actually got a report about the state of the XBRL standard in 2032, in 15 years' time. And I don't really understand how that's operated. And it's also a little bit disappointing about what we've actually got in the report, because it's lots of information from 15 years in the future. So what we really want are the football scores for the next few years, because that would be quite helpful, or maybe the Euro Millions lottery numbers. But we didn't get any of that either. What we got instead was a report from the CEO of XBRL International in 2032. Now it turns out that's actually an artificial intelligence and not a person anymore. But anyway, let's see what we can make of where these standards sit and what turns out to be important 15 years in advance. So if you look back 15 years ago, that is back to 2017, the idea that structured digital reporting wasn't just helpful but was essential was really only beginning to take hold. It was being used in a very large number of environments, mostly regulatory reporting, just beginning to be enterprise reporting in 2017. But the idea that it wasn't the syntax that was important, but the meaning around all of the information in all of those definitions was important, was only just beginning to take hold. And even now in 2032, it isn't entirely understood. However, since there's this new black hole communication arrangement, it only seems sensible to try to inform you guys back in 2017 what has happened and what continues to happen now, back in now it's very confusing. I'm just basically confused. Anyway, thought it would be helpful to discuss a few areas relating to financial safety, to capital formation, and some of the things that underpin those things. So in particular, that relates things like identity, granular information, dictionaries, and the central importance of platforms, interoperable platforms, and the way that you can discover information in this future age. So let's start by looking at financial safety. So the next generation digital currencies have obviously made an extraordinary change to the way that all kinds of things are dealt with. Fundamentally, it makes moving money around much safer. It also makes it much more transparent. because it is possible for authorized people, which it turns out are mostly the regulators, to track exactly what's occurring. But that really has changed the way that financial institutions need to be thought about. So now that about 35% of all money is not held at a bank, it's just held in a wallet, it's just a distributed, you think of that as Bitcoin in 2017, but that's no longer relevant for reasons you'll discover. But in any event, that idea is really important. And all this information and all this cash is held in wallets, not in bank accounts. I mean, the older generation, I guess that's the people here today, still rely a lot on bank accounts. But the younger generation, they're not interested. And for companies, it's much easier to do things in wallets. But of course, that money needs to be managed, so that all gets managed in real time by intelligent agents. So what we end up with is this sort of ongoing battle. It's a real problem. It's a sort of a neural war between different AIs. So we've got, on one hand, the agents that are investing money, and they're trying to find ways to do that in ways that maximize the return. And then you've got regulators who, on behalf of all those depositors, it's not a proper term anymore, are needing to ensure that that's safe. So the monitoring process and the investment process are working not always hand in hand. Now, it turns out that not all of those models work. We still have lots of problems with various kinds of long-tail risk. Insurance is a real problem because, I mean, all of the climate change models, they still talk about 2 degrees, but I mean, in 2032, we're already much warmer. It's 3 degrees now, so we're sweating in London. A lot has had to change. Regulators have had to change completely the way that they collect information, what they monitor, and the way that they monitor that information. And they've had to think about all of this in terms of real time. Now, the really good news is that through standardization of
para nosotros es una gran satisfacción volver a...
Now, one of the other benefits, perhaps, of this new approach
de las conclusiones del foro BP. Llevamos 15 años de relación con la cátedra. Es la 13ª vez que se presentan las conclusiones del foro, en esta ocasión sobre movilidad sostenible. Y realmente poder tener como socio y como impulsor para que estudiemos y discutamos sobre estos temas a BP es desde luego una alegría y una satisfacción, no solamente por el interés que tenemos en estos temas, sino sobre todo por la confianza que han demostrado en la escuela, en la cátedra durante estos últimos 15 años. Además, este tema también nos resulta muy cercano, puesto que desde BIT estamos promoviendo un observatorio sobre el vehículo eléctrico y movilidad sostenible. Me acompañan hoy en la mesa Enrique González, director de Comunicaciones Institucionales de BP, e Ignacio Pérez Ardeaga, director de la cátedra BP, que presentará un resumen de las sesiones internas del foro, como decía antes. Después tendremos una mesa redonda sobre movilidad sostenible en las ciudades. ¿Cómo se ha afrontado este reto en otros países, en otras ciudades? ¿Cómo lo estamos afrontando nosotros? ¿Dónde están las principales dificultades? ¿Son estas dificultades tecnológicas, regulatorias, ideológicas, políticas? ¿Cómo va a afectar esto a los usuarios? Supongo que son algunas de las preguntas que nos hacemos y algunas de las cosas que se han estado tratando y que serán hoy abordadas. Los que estuvisteis el año pasado seguramente, depende de la memoria que tengáis, yo como lo tenía escrito, pues claro, me acuerdo. Me voy a repetir en algo de lo que voy a decir ahora. El año pasado hablamos de transición energética y hacía una pequeña reflexión sobre la necesidad de encontrar acuerdos de largo plazo cuando tenemos que resolver problemas que son de largo plazo y que van a requerir de inversiones y de infraestructuras, y con la movilidad sostenible nos va a ocurrir lo mismo. El objetivo está claro, necesitamos un modelo sostenible de movilidad. Discutamos, analicemos todo lo que haga falta. A nosotros nos encanta tener la cátedra y tener la posibilidad de haber dedicado este tiempo de calidad de unos cuantos expertos para discutir sobre este tema. Discutamos todo lo que haga falta, analicemos todo lo que haga falta y acordemos qué es lo que hay que hacer, porque si el objetivo lo tenemos claro y también tenemos claro lo que hay que hacer, lo que queda es lo fácil, solamente hay que ejecutar las acciones, trabajar y sobre todo no volver a discutir. El año pasado ilustré esta misma idea con un proverbio africano que dice: para moverte rápido viaja solo, para llegar lejos viaja acompañado. Desde luego hoy, seguramente en España más que nunca, pero yo tengo memoria, necesitamos de acuerdos de largo plazo para poder llegar lejos. Tiene la palabra Enrique González, director de Comunicación y Asuntos Institucionales de BP.
The other thing that all these technology changes have created is a real blurring between the lines of public and private securities issues. The need for capital hasn't gone away. The innovation continues to be within the small businesses, the startup businesses. Some of those will be lifestyle businesses and support families. Some of those will be enormous new businesses which will become public one day. But the process of acquiring cash and acquiring investment in those businesses has changed in a way that you might be able to imagine in 2017, but is really very substantially different. Now, all of that real-time monitoring, which underpins the way that our capital markets work now, isn't possible without really clear definitions and standardization in that process. So perhaps that's of interest. Now, identity, of course, is something else that really underpins this. There was the terrible phishing storm in 2022. We think that killed off about 40,000 companies and wiped 11 trillion off the markets. It was a terrible crash. There was a lot of other impacts. I mean, there was an awful lot of deaths in hospitals as a result of that environment. And, I mean, people just cut the cords. So all the people that in 2017 were investing in Internet of Things for hospitals and healthcare, forget it, because that's just...
Pero también no debemos olvidar que los recursos son finitos y
there's lots of other Internet of Things, obviously, but not in healthcare. Anyway, moving on, the LEI, the Legal Entity Identifier, just after that
en ese camino, la regulación de definir un marco que preserve el bienestar de los ciudadanos,
turned out to be really coming of age. And the Legal Entity Identifier, which if you don't know about, you should immediately go and find one, and indeed acquire one. So the LEI turns out to really provide a way not just to provide identity about individual organizations, but for the role that people work in organizations. So the combination of LEIs and digital security means that now a lot of the communications that we do is insulated so that we don't accept any communications unless we know that it really comes from somebody acting in a well-identified, well-understood entity, which is perhaps not the way that Tim Berners-Lee expected the Internet to work, but turns out to be essential. However, that's also very important for everything to do with reporting. So because of strong cryptography, really trustworthy open reporting is possible today thanks in part to open identity. So in theory, only the people that are supposed to can see those reports, and usually that works extremely well. Clear identity has also created that transnational tracking of funds that we were talking about earlier, and really underpins investment and simplifies a lot of things. Again, because we can publish information into the marketplace very quickly, and it's very clear that it's legitimate and where it's come from, and of course it's audited, then that process is perhaps simpler than it is back now, it turns out that all of this information is incredibly important, and granular data, the collection of huge quantities of very granular data, underpins a lot of what regulators rely on.
Son muchas y estarán disponibles en la página web de la cátedra.
And I don't know which one it was, they told us, but
como se ha
what we
dicho,
thought was the
hacemos
best
15
protected
años
central bank in the world
de la creación de la cátedra
was hacked.
y ha
All
sido
the
realmente
granular
una
information about
relación
real-time
magnífica la que hemos
positions
tenido
was
con BP
stolen.
España,
And then
estimulante
the
por una
hackers
parte
had
y
a
por otra
massive
con total
benefit.
libertad para elegir los temas,
And
para encontrar
so
los
that was a real
planteamientos,
problem,
para
and that's changed the way that
proponer
granular data
cosas.
works. It's
El
helpful
tema de
that
este
those
año ha sido
hackers were actually
modalidad
finally
movilidad
found,
sostenible.
and they've been locked up, so
No
that's
es
good.
precisamente mi tema de
That's meant that
especialización,
although
pero he aprendido
essentially
mucho
every single
estos 2 días en el foro, espero que se note por el bien de todos. Lo que hemos hecho fundamentalmente ha sido más que proponer soluciones o recomendaciones, el identificar los problemas y yo creo que formular bien las preguntas. Y queda mucho trabajo por hacer. Empezamos entonces, y lo primero que quiero decir es una transparencia que siempre utilizo, nuestra forma de ver lo que entendemos por sostenibilidad en relación con la energía es el poder garantizar acceso a las diversas formas de energía moderna para satisfacer las necesidades de todos a un precio asequible ahora y a futuro. Y esto inedudablemente lo tenemos que ligar con el conseguir que nuestra economía sea baja en carbono. Los foros, que son 13, como se ha citado hace un momento, en los cuales que hemos puesto en marcha durante todos estos años. Aquí tienen todos los temas que hemos ido tratando. En el año 2009 tratamos el tema que es prácticamente el mismo de este año, Sustainable Transportation Policies, aunque estábamos algo más centrados en tecnologías y bastante enfocados hacia el peak oil en aquel momento. El año pasado elegimos, yo creo que con mucho acierto, una transición energética en España y cómo mirar hacia un camino, un futuro, un roadmap. Y este año pues hemos elegido el transporte. Motivos obvios, es algo que es un tema que está alcanzando todavía más preeminencia, además de su contribución obvia al desarrollo económico y social, pues es también un contribuyente importante a la falta de sostenibilidad del modelo energético actual. Y esto por 2 causas. Una, por una parte, el que tiene una contribución elevada a las emisiones de gases de efecto invernadero, un 23% del total, de las cuales de este 23 el 75% corresponde al transporte rodado, que funciona en un 90% con productos petrolíferos. Y por otra parte, y cada vez más importante, por su contribución a la polución atmosférica. El transporte es responsable de aproximadamente la mitad de las emisiones de
regulators, some of them get defined by national or international standard setters, some of them just get reused. But most of all, that sharing and reuse and comparison turns out to be what underpins reporting in the modern age. So encouraging reuse and sharing of terms between those regulators and between accounting and finance fields just is at the very core of all of this. So way back in 2016, someone suggested that data is the new oil. Well, of course, it's much, much more valuable than oil, which is really not that important going into the future, but only with clear definitions, only where that's shared and reused and is done so as far and as wide as possible. Now, interoperability is another big theme. Back at the turn of the century, when a lot of standards started to construct, they all sort of seem to be competing. Well, we now very much understand that that's not a question of competing. Different environments have got different purposes. Accountants need different information to economists, and auditors need different information, and business people need information again. What's important is to have open platforms that are well constructed, that use reusable dictionaries, and that means that those data definitions can be connected and can intersect. Now, that hasn't always worked out. There's an example here that the AI gave about there being 6 times as many repos outstanding as actually there were in underlying securities. So that could have been a bit of a data definition glitch, but this interoperability is vital. So ensuring that those data definitions get reused isn't just something for government agencies, it's just as important for the private sector and a large number of other disciplines and other groups. Now, working out how to fund and make that collaboration operate, because it's a human task, not an AI task, is a vital part of what needs to happen going forward and is something that we're really only working out how to do really well now in 2032. So then perhaps the other biggest change since 2017 is this idea of discovery, which was concentrated perhaps in some academic networks at the time that you're reading this report, but it's now very, very important. So we've seen a real coming of age in this area. So clear identity, accessible dictionaries, and distributed platforms mean that it's possible to acquire the right information at the right time. And that is only available through sensible discovery and indexing. Now, ESG reporting led the way there because that used to be sort of buried in PDF reports and sitting on company websites. But now that's truly accessible, it's digital, it's fully indexed. So it's possible to interpret a bunch of risks that never used to be able to be identified. And that's actually a very important part of financial analysis these days. But that's also true for things like Pillar 3 reporting, which you'll be pleased to know is still being just about worked out. So standards, collaboration, and embracing these new technologies were all part of the picture that is driving economies right around the world forward today in 2032. So that's an awful lot of change. What has changed? Well, everything and nothing. The XBRL standards, as well as lots of other standards, are relied on by businesses, by regulators, and a host of other organizations to help ensure that we have consistent and clear definitions to be able to underpin all of this economic activity. It provides a trusted and effective way for definitions to be created and maintained, and that's what's perhaps most important. All the syntax you still find people that are still using the old XBRL 2.1. You guys remember that stuff? Anyway, all of that is only possible through enhanced collaboration. So collaboration is a very significant focus. And that collaboration allows and underpins the discovery of data by the right people at the right time. So that's quite a lot to take in. And maybe you found that report from the future interesting. I would just add, back in 2017, that many physicists believe that there's such a thing as a multiverse. We live in infinite numbers of parallel universes. So maybe that was just one future. And the reality is that you guys need to ensure that we create that future. And events like this are an important part of that process. So I'm sorry that I'm not able to stay for the next day and a half. But I'm hopeful that you'll have a very, very productive time and hope that a few things were helpful there. So, thanks.
Thank you, John. I just hope that one vision will not realize and my Bitcoin savings are going to rise. I'm going to buy this Aventador that I'm dreaming of.
Okay, we have spoken about financial data standardization, core vocabularies, and so on. And now let me give the word to Ana del Valle. She's director of the